with you. Visit Fleet News for full award criteria.
Now, Japan is pushing back against Carlos Ghosn. Its Justice Minister, Masako Mori, called Ghosn's criticism of the nation's legal system, quote, intolerable. I think we were.
No matter what nationality you're from, top-class businessmen like him should respect the law of the country where he worked and deal with the legal procedures with legitimate evidence to prove that he's innocent.
Ghosn of spreading lies. Okay, let's go to the latest in global news with Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. Let's start here in the UK. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle say they plan to step back from their duties. They also plan to work to become financially independent. Bloomberg's Alex Morales has all those details.
The couple, known as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, said they plan to split their time between the UK and North America and launch a charitable entity. In a sign their decision has caused divisions in the royal household, the Queen's office issued a statement saying talks with the Sussexes are at an early stage and that the issues are complicated and will take time to work through. Harry, who's sixth in line for the throne, and Markle have had a fraught relationship with the UK press, and their decision is likely to be an attempt to withdraw from the public eye. In London, Alex Morales, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now to China. Mysterious pneumonia outbreak that has sickened dozens in central China is linked to a previously unidentified coronavirus, according to state TV. Coronaviruses are known to cause mild to severe respiratory conditions. Early findings suggest a newly discovered pathogen isn't easily transmitted among people. Hong Kong is preparing a bold spending plan to boost its economy. That's according to the city's financial secretary, Paul Chan. He's pledging to maintain spending on infrastructure and public service, saying the government has the resources to offset the recession.
These two together can help our economy by about 2%. Going forward in 2020, we will continue to spend boldly to help those disadvantaged.
And 1 billion animals may have been killed in Australia's bushfires since September, according to a scientist. This doubling earlier estimates as the scale of the crisis continues to emerge. New figures from the University of Sydney's Chris Dickman show almost 800 million animals may have been killed through burning or the loss of habitat. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you. Let's take a look at the events you should be looking out for today. Watch out for airline December sales today. Scandinavian Airlines will announce the numbers at 10 a.m. UK time, followed by Air France KLM at 12:30 p.m. Over in Spain, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is expected to name his cabinet. In the UK, the Brexit deal law proceeds to third reading in the House of Commons, and later in the US, Fed Vice Chairman Richard Clarida speaks at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, and St. Louis Fed President James Bullard speaks to the Wisconsin Bankers Association in Madison. Meanwhile, if we look to the markets, Roger, we are seeing a bit of risk come back. European equities are actually higher for a third day, up 0.7%, 14 minutes into the open, as we look ahead to the Middle East next.
And we will be looking ahead. President Trump saying Iran appears to be standing down, yet he promises additional sanctions on Tehran. We'll get updated on all that coming here next on Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
Message and data rate may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Tom McKenzie.
Former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn speaking in Beirut after his dramatic escape from Tokyo. Let's have some reaction to that now. Sophia University law professor Stephen Givens joins us from Tokyo. What did you make of Ghosn's press conference, his performance? Was he convincing?
In many ways, I think it was a masterful performance. And he very convincingly made the case, first of all, that the initial charges brought against him were weak, flimsy. He also made a convincing case that this was part of a palace coup that was trying to scuttle his plans to merge Nissan and Renault. And he also, I think, was very convincing about the Japanese criminal justice system, that he and other criminal suspects here undergo procedures that are cruel and not in keeping with international standards.
We're clearly a long way from any resolution between the two sides on this. How potentially damaging is this to Japan Inc.?
I think it's very damaging. He said that there's been $10 billion wiped off the market cap of Nissan, which is true. Overall, I think that the damage both to Nissan, to Renault and Japan has been quite serious.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin. For today's morning call, here's Richard Jones.
Good morning, Sandra. Strong gains across all the regional equity markets in Asia today, with the Nikkei 225 leading the up move, trading higher by 2.3%. The Kospi is up 1.6%, Hang Seng up 1.5%, and the Shanghai Composite up 0.9%. The E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures are also both trading higher, up 3 and 0.4%, respectively. European equities are also opening strongly, with the Euro Stoxx 50 up 0.8%, the DAX up 1.25%, the CAC up 0.5%, with the FTSE 100 up 0.4%. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is 1 basis point lower at 1.87%, with the 10-year German bond yield 1 basis point higher at minus 0.2%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is a little changed, with most G10 currency pairs trading in tight ranges today. Looking at the European event risk calendar, German industrial production for November came in stronger than expected, with Eurozone and Italy unemployment data for November still to come. In terms of central banks, we get the Bank of England's Carney speaking in London this morning, in addition to the ECB's Villeroy, Schnabel, and Weidmann speaking later in the day. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Sandra?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Good morning, Sandra. Pressure is mounting on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi after 250 million people took part in a nationwide strike yesterday in protest at the government's economic policies. Transport and banking services were disrupted as employees took part in the action. India is struggling with the slowest economic growth since 2009. Turkish President Erdogan and his Russian counterpart Putin officially opened the Turk Stream natural gas pipeline. However, the hot topic of the day was more about political diplomacy rather than energy trade. President Erdogan says he will work to defuse escalating tensions between the US and Iran. And finally, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy will face a corruption trial in October. He's charged with attempting to persuade a high-ranking magistrate to leak confidential information about another investigation targeting him. French investigators began tapping Sarkozy Sarkozy's phone back in 2013 as part of a probe into allegations of illegal funding by the regime of Libya's former leader, Muammar Gaddafi. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, markets breathing a sigh of relief as the US and Iran seem to be stepping back from potential war. President Trump has indicated he will not order a military response to the missile attacks on US bases in Iraq. He said no American or Iraqi soldiers were killed in the strikes and said Tehran appears to be standing down. However, the president did announce tough new sanctions on Iran. For more, let's go live to Dubai, where Bloomberg's Middle East reporter Zainab Fatah is standing by. Zainab, great to have you with us. It could be argued that Iran's restrained response gave President Trump an opening to claim victory, but is Iran really done with its reprisals?
You're absolutely right. It was actually designed to allow him to stand down and claim victory. From our reporting, we are being told that Iran hit empty plots of land within the sprawling base. The Iraqi Prime Minister was informed by Iran ahead of the strikes. And on top of this, a U.S. official told us that the American military had indications of this strike before time, and they were able to move around 1,000 personnel from the base into hardened shelters. So obviously Iran's response was very deliberate, and it was meant to not inflict any loss of life and to allow President Trump to reduce the tension. But a lot of people here aren't really that convinced that this is Iran's response after all. Maybe that's the response that the government officially had to do to kind of deal with the anger that's across Iran. We saw the images from the funeral, the millions of people who came out. It had to show a response to what happened to the general.
Well, indeed. I mean, Zainab, after we heard all about the fire and thunder that was threatened by Iran, this seems a very weak response. I mean, is the suspicion that there is something further coming down the line, perhaps in Iran's own good time?
Well, absolutely. A lot of people believe that Iran probably will resort to other means, to resort to its old playbook, which is that they would rely on their proxies to do the attacks here and there, and at the same time they would have plausible deniability. The tanker attacks, the attack on Aramco, the various attacks in the region, they all happen. Iran never ever claims responsibility for them, but most people kind of know that Iran's proxies and they carry out the work for Iran, and those proxies are powerful. We have the proxies in paramilitary groups in Iraq, and we have Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Zainab, what's the prospect of a return to negotiations on nuclear arms?
There are hopes that, with this general out of the way, that hopefully at least the Gulf countries would be able to reach out to Iran and try to come up with some regional understanding. Now, the issue is many are unconvinced that Iran, after being hit this hard, after all the sanctions, they would have the appetite to sit down again and get into another round of negotiations. At a time, they just finished negotiations not too long ago with President Obama and signed the agreement that was agreed by many world powers.
Zainab, I suppose the other country we shouldn't forget that has the dog in this fight is, of course, Iraq. Iraq was where the missiles landed, and Iraq is a country whose parliament has seemed to be wanting to push foreign soldiers out. Do we know how that's going to play out?
So the vote in the Iraqi parliament was non-binding, and it was boycotted by nearly half of the parliament. The Sunni bloc, the Kurdish blocs, they didn't attend. Now Sunnis and Kurds, they don't want to see the Americans out because they worry that this means delivering Iraq into the hands of the Iranians. That Iraq would be completely controlled and will become a proxy state for Iran. So they would dread seeing the Americans leave. At the same time, if we start seeing the Iranian proxies intensify their attacks on the Americans there, many worry that the American president, who's already always favored not having a lot of interventions, he may pull the troops. That's what a lot of people worry about.
Great to have you with us. Bloomberg's Middle East reporter Zainab Fatah joining us from Dubai. And as we were saying before we got the update, we are seeing a little bit of relief across markets. Roger, I mean, in the European session, 25 minutes into the equity market open, we're up 0.6% on the stock 600. We've seen the yen retreat after a lot of volatility in dollar yen yesterday.
And, of course, one of the aspects of the crisis we haven't mentioned is the Boeing 737 crash. We're going to explore that further in the programme here on Daybreak Europe in just a moment. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. KB Home opens its books later today. Home builders saw gains on Wall Street yesterday after Lennar's fourth quarter was better than expected. The housing market remains strong despite home prices easing. Wall Street stretched to some new records yesterday after President Trump said Iran seems to be standing down. The Nasdaq starts the session at a new high. Bed Bath & Beyond will be a stock to watch today. The retailer plunged as much as 25% in after-hours trading after reporting its 11th consecutive quarter of declining sales. New CEO Mark Tritton called the 8.3% decline unsatisfactory. The company withdrew its financial guidance for the year. The president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce will give his State of American Business speech this morning. He's expected to talk about some recent victories, including consensus on the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Why do so many Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies count on GEP? Because GEP helps them optimize their procurement and supply chain operations, helping reduce expenses, boost EBITDA, and increase competitiveness. The results are nothing short of amazing. Strategy, software, managed services. GEP brings it all together. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
Why has
This ain't just lunch. It's the KFC fill-up lunch for $1.99. It's mighty fine. Tingles your spine, so jump in line, because it's time to dine on a mini fillet burger, 2 hot wings and fries, all for a fist-pumping $1.99. What the... The KFC fill-up lunch every day until 3 p.m. At participating restaurants every day from 2nd to 26th of January until 3 p.m. only, subject to availability.
You don't just live in one room, so why should your Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's super-fast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre areas, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
Cutting for the net. Scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Neera Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
30 minutes into the equity market open in Europe, a third day of gains is what we're seeing for the Stock 600, up 0.6% on Europe's equity benchmark. Every industry group in the green, led by tech, telecoms and healthcare. Oil and gas, the only industry group lagging in the red. Not a surprise given we're seeing, we were earlier seeing a little bit of a pullback in oil, but actually we're in the green now. WTI up 0.4%, 59.87. Brent at 65.75, up 0.5%. Generally across assets, we're seeing a little bit of calm come through with signs of de-escalation for now between the US and Iran. Across regional equity benchmarks in Europe, the FTSE 100 is up 0.4%. The CAC 40 up 0.5%. The DAX up more than 1%. IBEX and FTSE MIB gaining 2%. And yesterday, of course, we saw the S&P 500 in the US close higher. Asian equities followed suit, posting a lot of green on the screen. Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures all up by at least 0.3%. The 10-year Treasury yield was a little bit lower earlier, which is interesting given the risk of on tone, but we're steady now on a 187 handle on that 10-year yield. But the risk on across markets is being reflected a little bit more in European bond markets, where you're seeing yields edge higher. The 10-year Bund yield and the 10-year gilt yield both up a basis point. Yesterday, dollar yen saw the highest realized volatility since August. The dollar's on the front foot against the yen today, for a fourth day actually, up almost 0.2%, 109.31. And looking at gold as well, yesterday dropping more than 1%, so its biggest retreat in 2 months. And we do continue to retreat today, down 0.5%, $1,548 an ounce.
Right, let's have a look at some of today's top stories. Boris Johnson held his first meeting with Ursula von der Leyen since she took the helm of the European Commission. The two leaders set out rival red lines for their visions of a post-Brexit deal. Bloomberg's Alex Morales reports.
The UK hasn't even started the second phase of its Brexit negotiations, intended to broker a trade deal with the European Union, and already the red lines are being drawn. Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Wednesday called for a free trade deal by the end of the year, but that was countered by EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen, who on a visit to London said that would be impossible to achieve. And while Johnson said the UK won't commit to alignment with EU rules and regulations, von der Leyen noted that every decision taken would come with a trade-off, and that if the UK abandons a level playing field on issues such as environmental standards and state aid, it won't have the highest quality access to EU markets. In London, Alex Morales, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, Japan is pushing back against Carlos Ghosn. Its justice minister says Ghosn's criticism of the nation's legal system is, quote, intolerable. She also accused him of spreading lies. This after the former Nissan chief also hit out at President Emmanuel Macron. He blamed the French leader for setting in motion the chain of events that led to his downfall.
Now, the US and Iran are backing away from a direct conflict, but tensions in the Middle East still remain very high. A Pentagon report indicated that the missile attack against US bases in Iraq was aimed to avoid casualties. President Trump used a speech yesterday to promise more sanctions on Iran.
Now, Iran may get help from the US, after all, in investigating the crash of the Boeing 737. Bloomberg's learned that Iran has invoked a United Nations treaty to seek assistance from other countries. American agencies are deciding whether it's legal to help under the terms of sanctions imposed on Iran. Conflicting signals have emerged about what might have caused the disaster.
Well, let's get more on that story by bringing in Bloomberg's senior editor for global business, Benedict Camel. So, Benedict, good morning to you. Now, let's start with the latest revelations. What more do we know about this crash and the attempt by the Iranian authorities to find out what happened?
So about a day after the crash, some more details are starting to emerge. The plane dropped off radar transmission shortly after takeoff. That's a surprising development that so far hasn't been cleared why that happened. The pilot also allegedly tried to return the aircraft to the airport. Just to remind people that this crash occurred very shortly after takeoff from Tehran. But there was no distress signal or emergency signal, so that's really the confusing part. What will probably help investigators quite materially is the recovery of the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. So these are two devices that commercial aircraft store, and they transmit and record all the main data, and crucially the voices in the cockpit. Those have been recovered. They're damaged, but not to a degree that they can't be read anymore. The question really now becomes who steers the investigation, who helps in the investigation. That will be a crucial test case, because we are operating in a very difficult political environment here.
Yeah, and on that note, Benny, how is the investigation being overshadowed by the political tensions?
Normally what happens is that the country where a plane goes down takes the lead on an investigation. So in this case, it would be Iran. Now, sometimes if a country doesn't have the infrastructure, just doesn't have the expertise, they will ask for others to come in and to help. And crucially, the plane manufacturers, the country of plane manufacturing, is also involved in the investigation. So this would be either Boeing in the US or Airbus in France and the wider European framework. In this case, with the tensions between Iran and the US at boiling point, it's very difficult to see how Iran might open up to help from the US and from Boeing. Boeing did say yesterday in an early reaction that they are standing by and are willing to help, and there are some signs that maybe under some sort of a UN resolution, Iran might let the US in to help, but whether the US can actually help and whether that conflicts with sanctions, that remains to be seen. So very, very difficult to navigate this one.
Benedict, I suppose the point, in a way, almost the unsayable thing at the basis of this is concern that this may be more than a coincidence, that this happened at a point of tension, of missiles flying around, all kinds of things like this. That might potentially be a huge embarrassment for Iran if it turns out to be something to do with that. And that's really the sensitivity that's at the root of it all.
Yes, absolutely. And this tragically wouldn't be the first time that a plane has been shot down by a stray missile. People will remember the Malaysian plane that was shot down by a book rocket in southern Ukraine a couple of years ago. Now, people know that at the time the plane crashed, the Tehran plane, there were missiles flying, or shortly before that there were missiles flying into Iraq. So there is that theory out there that maybe there was a stray missile that was involved. The Iranian side has been very forceful in saying that this was an engine fault, this was a technical fault, that this was not a sort of a disaster that was caused by a missile. But there is no absolute clarity on that point yet. So again, it'll be interesting to see how this investigation unfolds, how open it will be conducted, whether there is an element of secrecy involved. There's a lot of international passengers on this plane. There was a large group of Canadians, almost 70 Canadians on this plane. So the international eyes will be on this investigation, and other countries will be very keen to find out what happened.
Great to have you with us. Thank you so much, Benedict Camel, our senior editor for Global Business. And now let's get to the latest in world news with Leanne Gerrans. Leanne.
Naira, good morning. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle may become stars on the public speaking circuit. The two have announced they are stepping back from their roles as senior members of the royal family. They say they'll work to become financially independent. One agent says Harry should be able to command as much as former President Obama, about $500,000 per appearance. A mysterious pneumonia outbreak that has sickened dozens in central China is linked to a previously unidentified coronavirus, China Central Television has said. Bloomberg's Jason Gale has all those details.
Coronaviruses are known to cause mild to severe respiratory conditions. While further research is needed, early findings in China suggest the newly discovered pathogen isn't easily transmitted among people or known to infect healthcare workers. That's eased concern that the novel virus might set off a contagion similar to the coronavirus that sparked the SARS outbreak 17 years ago. In Melbourne, Jason Gale, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Hong Kong is preparing a bold spending plan to boost its economy. That's according to its Financial Secretary, Paul Chan. He's pledging to maintain spending on infrastructure and public service, saying the government has the resources to offset the recession.
These two together can help our economy by about 2%. Going forward in 2020, we will continue to spend boldly to help those disadvantaged.
And Croatia is signalling that any agreement between the EU and post-Brexit Britain on a future relationship would be limited if the UK prevents a negotiating deadline from being extended. Bloomberg's Jonathan Stearns reports.
Croatian Prime Minister Andrej Plenković said in the capital Zagreb on Wednesday that the EU needs to be realistic about just how ambitious an accord reached over the next 11 months could be. The UK is on course to leave the EU by January 31st, paving the way for a transition period that will maintain the economic status quo in Zagreb. Jonathan Stearns, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Roger.
Leanne, thanks very much for the world news. Now, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to be talking to Tony Gibb, Fidelity International Head of Investment, directing equities. A lot to talk about in the equity sphere as we go into 2020, not least the rally there seems to have been on the back of that rather better news from the Middle East, the lessening of tensions, and perhaps a sense that for the moment at least that crisis is over. But will the underlying optimism about 2020 resume? We'll see about that. Daybreak Europe, this is Bloomberg.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at Inovalon.com.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Having to deal with financial stuff can make you feel... ah! But at Money Supermarket, we make you feel... ah. That's because we go further to help you get money calm. We don't just compare. We cut prices to help you get better car insurance deals. Get money car. Money Supermarket.
The NBA is on TuneIn Premium.
Pointer by Anthony Davis. It's good!
Each week, TuneIn picks an NBA game you just can't miss. 2 of the top teams in the Western Conference go head-to-head. This Sunday, the Clippers are at the Nuggets. Tip-off is at 8 p.m. Eastern.
3-ball on the way. He got it to go! 3 from the angle. Got it!
Search NBA to follow your favorite NBA team today.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Down the middle of the 10, got to the 5, tumbles in, touchdown!
TuneIn has your NFL playoffs live all weekend. So when you're running to the store or stuck in traffic, TuneIn has you covered.
He's taking contact, and he kicks it in! Touchdown! Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Search NFL and get prepared for the action.
Touchdown!
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium,
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats.
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, European equities are very much in the green. The DAX leading gains, rallying 1.5% in Frankfurt. The stocks 600 higher by 0.6%, and the FTSE gaining 0.5% here in London. We're also seeing US futures pointing higher, and it all follows a fairly positive trading day in Asia as the US and Iran roll back those tensions between the two. Havens like Treasuries also holding losses, with the 10-year yield currently down at 1.86%. If we take a look at 10-year bund yields this morning, they're up a basis point at -19. 10-year gilt yields up 2 basis points at 83 basis points. The yen is a bit weaker this morning, down 0.2% at 109.3 against the greenback. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is unchanged. The offshore yuan bid this morning up 0.2% at 6.93. Sterling and the euro also holding this morning. If we take a look at sterling, just below that 131 level, the euro at 111. Finally, in commodities, oil has steadied at pre-attack levels. We're seeing markets really appraising current supply risks. WTI just above $60 a barrel, Brent just below $66 a barrel, gold currently down 0.5% at $1,548 a troy ounce. Finally, do keep an eye on iron ore today. It slipped almost 2% in Singapore earlier after iron ore shipments from Australia's leading port notched a full-year record. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Dan Garrins with more on what's going on around the world. Sandra, thank you. An emergency warning has been issued for South Australia's Kangaroo Island amid extreme fire conditions. Made up mostly of holiday shacks, as thought fewer than 100 people live there, but the island is home to a lot of local and endangered wildlife. More than a third of the island has burnt. Thailand is embracing medical cannabis, with the industry poised to expand to more than $660 million by 2024. Thailand's Deputy Prime Minister wants to add cannabis plantations and processing facilities to a northeastern farming province. At the same time, the government has launched a campaign with Dr. Ganja, a green cuddly teddy whose job is to educate Thailand about the benefits of medical marijuana. And finally, after months of speculation, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have confirmed they want to step back as senior members of the royal family. Harry and Meghan say they plan to split their time between the UK and North America. It's understood the Queen wasn't warned about the couple's statement before they released it. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Jan Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger, you've got to coin the phrase.
Mexit.
Mexit.
Megxit, apparently. I just love I think it's New York Post coverage of this, the picture on the front page. Meghan in her curlers sitting on a sofa next to Harry in his vest. I mean, it's, imagining the future for what we're still calling the senior royals, apparently.
Do we have any idea how they're going to become financially independent?
Well, we don't, but what they think is they're going to be able to give talks. And as we've heard, some people believe that he'll be commanding £500,000 for a talk, similar to what Obama does as a former president of the US. But it's really interesting because when I woke up this morning and saw this headline, I was actually genuinely quite shocked.
Oh, yeah?
And I think, yes, I was.
A hardened newshound like yourself, shocked.
Strange things happen. Yes.
All right, Leanne Gerrans with the World News. Let's get back to the markets. And with us in the London studio, Tony Gibb, Fidelity International Head of Investment Directing Equities. Tony, great to have you with us. Happy New Year. We wake up today with a little bit of calm in markets, even risk on, with signs of the tension de-escalating slightly between the US and Iran. How optimistic are you about 2020, first of all, taking into account the geopolitical risk and the great returns we had in equities last year?
Yeah, I think those are the two really important points. I think, we had an extremely strong year in 2019. So markets up north of 20% and in many areas hitting new highs at the end of last year. And I think a lot of that performance was driven by a re-rating of stocks rather than necessarily fundamentals coming through. So stocks have now got to levels where they were a year or so ago in terms of valuation. So things are looking relatively stretched. So I think it's going to be difficult for stocks to post the sort of gains that they posted in 2019 again this year. However, I think notwithstanding the geopolitical risk, which, as you said, seems to have subsided a little bit given the sort of the stand down from Trump and from Iran over the last 24 hours or so. I think, interest rates still remain quite low. I think we are seeing a sort of a rebound from the sort of mini slowdown that we saw over the course of last year. Corporate fundamentals are reasonably strong. So I think, the environment is still reasonably positive for equities, but I think it's unlikely that we're going to see the sort of gains that we saw in 2019.
Yeah.
And headwinds do kind of matter, not least obviously the geopolitics, but also I'm thinking wider perhaps in the US-China trade dispute. We do now have a confirmation that the Vice Premier Liu He will go to Washington, will put ink on the paper of this deal that we've heard so much about. But at the same time, in the background, we got the fact that Chinese car sales again down rather dramatically, more than 7%. This suggestion that things are in that part of the global economy and the way that affects the rest of it, including Europe, of course, they're mixed signals, I think we would have to say.
I think that's absolutely right. But then, you mentioned some of the negative aspects there. But then I think, on the other side of the ledger, I think, steel inventories in China are as low as they've been in a very long time. We're seeing a sort of less, sort of slower inflation in China, which means that the policymakers there have a little bit more that they could do in terms of policy easing. And as you said, there has been a sort of a step down in trade war tensions, which has been a big driver of when there has been negativity in 2019, which admittedly was relatively few and far between. It was trade wars that drove it, and we are seeing something of a improvement there. Although I think this is something that's going to rattle on for quite some time, years rather than months.
Are you in the camp, Tony, that believes that that for equities in 2019, a lot of the gains were down to sort of the surprise dovishness of central banks, in particular the Fed, whereas 2020 is going to be a lot more about growth having to show up and justify the gains we've seen in equities? And if so, how would you express that regionally, perhaps, or in terms of styles? Would you be expecting value to start outperforming growth, for example?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think, what we did see last year was, yes, central banks being more dovish, and that was, what really sort of kick-started the market after a very poor Q4 of 2018. And as a result of that, it tended to be the more, sort of high-quality growth stocks that perform best, the companies that have those long-dated cash flows and benefit from lower interest rates. So we saw, really strong trade from momentum, from sort of quality growth type names. I think, what we could see this year is when, as I guess central banks sort of passed the baton from monetary policy to fiscal policy, and governments have to take up some of the responsibility for growth. We could see something of a change, and that potentially is the catalyst for value to start to work again. We did see that a little bit towards the sort of August, September of last year, and potentially that could be the driver. And I think there are some signs that is on the cards. In the UK, I think it's quite likely that Mr. Johnson does push through quite a big sort of fiscal package, and I think also in Japan we've seen something similar. I think Trump, I don't think, is averse to spending and cutting taxes as we've seen in the past.
But Toby, we are seeing resistance to that in some areas too. Yeah. I mean, Germany's the obvious one, and that takes us on to the whole area of German manufacturing, which we know is not looking great at the moment. Do you see a bottoming out coming out in Germany, in Europe generally?
Yeah, I think. I think even in Germany, I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot, and other pockets of Europe. I think there's a lot of resistance to fiscal stimulus, particularly with when unemployment is at relatively low levels in certainly in Germany and Holland. So I think there is resistance to that. But then I think there's still areas where I think there's less political sensitivity for fiscal spending, and I think things like infrastructure and particularly green infrastructure. So I think there are areas where governments can still spend without that sort of that political pushback. I think, as you said, I think there has been some weaker data from Germany, but somewhat mixed. There've been some has been strong, some has been weaker. But I think we are seeing a sort of a bottoming, and I think what we have seen is domestic Europe has actually been relatively robust. It's been more the export picture that's been weak. And back to your question earlier about trade wars and particularly Chinese cars, and the US also, given potential for tariffs from the US.
Yeah, and there was a really interesting call overnight from SMBC Nikko, Toby, where it was said that the chip cycle gained major attention last year for its influence on the global economy, but now that it's turned up, attention this year will likely focus on automobiles. And we had BMW giving very positive signals about sales in 2020 yesterday. As you look at this bottoming out, and as you look across equity sectors, are you potentially positive, as SMBC Nikko is, on car makers, or are there other sectors that you'd be looking to want to buy in this environment in 2020?
I think the semiconductor sector is definitely interesting. I think we have seen a bottoming there. I think there's still quite a lot of opportunity there. I'm more cautious, I think, on autos. I think, I guess there's a lot of, there's obviously the cyclical picture that you talked about, but there's also quite a lot going on from a structural perspective. The sort of, the shift that we're likely to see to EVs, to autonomous vehicles, which, is still in its infancy, but it does have a material impact on the sector. And I think it's the spending, the investment, the R&D that's required that will be a big drag on the sector.
Toby, thank you very much. Toby Gibb there, Fidelity.
Take the helm and ignite your spirit of adventure with a Sunsail holiday. Relax on a skippered yacht from sunny St. Lucia to the nutmeg-scented shores of Grenada. Or take charge with a bareboat charter along Dubrovnik's glittering coastline. With up to 20% off selected destinations, now is the time to book your Sunsail adventure. Sunsail. See the world differently.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. Banking jobs, building jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, Waterloo jobs, Canary Wharf jobs. New year, new you, new job, jobs. First jobs, flexible jobs, pay off the Christmas debt jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, small jobs, big jobs, work from home in your PJs jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
This year, it's time to live well your way. Time to hit Boots. To reboot your get up and go. Reboot your fresh start. Reboot your vegan choices. And reboot your... Make 2020 your time for a reboot. Save up to half price on wellbeing products in-store on Boots.com or via the app. Boots. Let's feel good. Subject to availability. Exclusions apply. See in-store or online for details. Offer ends 28th of January.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
We're now
seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some types of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, though recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of...
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London, DAB, Digital Radio.
It's just gone 9 o'clock here in London, just gone 10 o'clock if you're in Berlin with Matt Miller. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes throughout the day on Bloomberg Radio. So let's get straight to a very solid European equity market session, in particular over in Germany. The Stock 600 as a whole up by 0.6%. The FTSE 100, a laggard, up by 0.4%. The Xetra DAX, though, in Germany, up by 1.4%. So perhaps it's actually more like Xetra DAX outperformance than FTSE underperformance, because the CAC 40 is up around 0.5% or so. So we do see the London market weighed down by some negative reaction in the oil space. We've seen, of course, the moves in equity markets broadly, and in particular oil prices and oil majors being dictated by the goings on in the Middle East and the level of geopolitical tension there. Today looks calmer. Today the market making a new assessment once again of the relative risks and rewards of getting further exposure to risk assets. And so we see investors deciding to draw something of a line in the sand. Is that premature? We'll discuss that next. So we see markets going higher, equity markets going higher. This followed an Asian session that was very broadly positive, up by 1.3% on the MSCI Asia Pacific, and set to continue for the short term at least. US futures point to a that will be higher in the US by between 3 to 0.5% on US equities. So the oil price, checking in with that, because we seem to have come a long way on the oil price in the last week or so, but 65.96 is where we trade on Brent, far below, or $5 below, $4 below the $70 a barrel mark that we got to at the height of those geopolitical tensions. The yield on the US 10-year is back up a bit. We're at 1.87% on the US 10-year yield. The dollar is broadly flat this morning. The yen, as you would expect, showing a little bit more weakness, down 0.2% against the US dollar with a 109 handle. Matt?
All right. Let's look at your markets. We check them for you, as you said, every 15 minutes. Let's get over to... And excuse me? I'm sorry, I'm hearing something in my ear here.
Okay, I'll help, shall I? Let's talk to Mark Champion, who joins us here in London. Let's get more details on this developing story out of the Middle East. The US and Iran are backing away from a direct conflict, it would seem. A Pentagon report